We're glad you decided to check out this message by Seabreeze Church and hope that you benefit from it. We also hope that you would join us either online or in person on a Sunday. We have a 9 o'clock live stream service online, and then we have in-person services on our campus at 9 and 10:30. So again, we hope that you would join us, and we hope that you enjoy this message.
That is like the smoothest intro music. It's like, I'm not cool enough for that. My name's Elliot, I'm the Connection Pastor, and our family, we went on the longest trip we've taken as a family a couple weeks ago. We went on a 2-week road trip. We stayed in 5 different spots. It was a lot of fun. We stayed in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah before we headed back home. And my phone, your phone might have this function too. I have an iPhone, and in my camera app on my phone, or my picture app, I can see there's a map function that shows me all the places that I've taken pictures. So I'm going to put on the screen what mine looks like. So this is, I can go on my phone, I can see kind of a map, and then I can zoom in and I can see the pictures that I've taken, kind of relive those memories. And a point of contention in my marriage is my wife and I, we traveled all the same places. She takes way more pictures than I do. So I'll come back from a trip with 5 photos. She'll come back with 500 photos. And then it's regularly, she'll be on my phone, why didn't you take more pictures? So hers is more filled in than this. But you can kind of get an idea of where our family travels. So we've kind of been all over the southwestern United States. But those northern states, we haven't been to those states. We haven't been to those states up in the north. And as I think about this function on my phone, I also think about, well, what if you could lay out the Bible this way? What if there was a map that you could have of the Bible that showed the places that you frequent and the places that you don't go to very often, or maybe you've never been to? So my guess is, a Bible would kind of lay out like this. So we'll give kind of all the books of the Bible. And if you were to think through, what are the books that people often read? What are the well-traveled books? Well, the 4 Gospels at the beginning of the New Testament, those would be well-traveled books. Those are 4 biographies about the life of Jesus. It's a great starting place. And then those 4 books are books that you just want to go back to again and again to remind yourself of who Jesus is and what he's done. I also think the New Testament letters would be well-traveled places. The letters are written to us after Jesus returns to heaven. He gives the Holy Spirit. He starts the church. And they detail how, as Christians, we're supposed to live. I think those would be well-traveled. I think for a lot of people in the Old Testament part of the Bible, you've got the books of Psalms and Proverbs, super helpful, practical, help us understand who God is. You've also have the book of Genesis. I think Genesis is generally a well-read book just because it's got some really interesting stuff if you're dealing with questions of origin and all those issues. So people would peruse Genesis. Or the books of history are fascinating. You've got books like 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Kings. They're narrative form history that's got some really fascinating stuff. That's where you would find the story of David and Goliath in some of those books. But I think the untraveled books of the Bible, the books that are kind of like those northern states on my map, the states that people don't go to as often, I think the untraveled books would be a group of 12 books known as the Minor Prophets. Now, these 12 books, the Minor Prophets, they're not known as the Minor Prophets because they're insignificant. It's just because they're shorter in length than the 5 books of major prophecy. So it's not that they're insignificant, they're just shorter books. I think these 12 books would probably be the untraveled region of the Bible. So what we're going to do today, and then for the coming weeks, is we're going to take a look at some of these minor prophets. And we're going to get into them, unpack them, and see what they're all about so that then you, on your own, you can take the time to go dig into them in more detail. And today we're going to start with the first minor prophet, which is the book of Hosea. It's a fascinating book. It's a shocking book. It's a book that gets our attention, but is a really, really helpful book that God decided to give us. Now, all these books that we're going to travel around in for the next couple of weeks, these books are God's word to a group of people who lived thousands of years ago. But God decided that these books should be written down and passed down so that we could have them because they have relevance to us today. So as we go through them and we see what it was that God was saying to the people thousands of years ago, God also has something for you and me today in our modern world that he wants to say to us. So as we wrestle with these, it's not just going to be about, okay, what was he saying to them? But we're also going to identify what is it that God's saying to us. We're going to dive in Hosea. And as we unpack Hosea this morning, there are 4 things that I want to highlight from the book. So if you're taking notes this morning, you got a handful of fill in the blanks, and you can take notes as we go along. But we're going to start with the context of the book of Hosea, and it's found in Hosea chapter 1, verse 1. Let me go ahead and read it. It says this: "The Lord gave this message to Hosea, son of Beeri, during the years when Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah were kings of Judah, and Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, was king of Israel." So right there at the very beginning, this is written to a group of people who lived in history. These are verifiable events. This sets up the context for the story. This is a point in Israel, the nation's history, when the nation was divided into 2 kingdoms. You had Israel in the north, and you had Judah in the south. They had had a civil war at a period in their history, and so they had divided into 2 kingdoms. You have 10 northern tribes, 2 southern tribes. Now, these 10 northern tribes, Israel, the purple on this map, this is Hosea's audience. This is who he's writing to. And their king is this king, Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, who's actually Jeroboam the second. He's the second king with this name, so they give him the name Jeroboam the second. This kingdom, the northern kingdom, for a long time, multiple kings, they had had a rough go of things. They had been conquered by enemies, they'd been defeated, there had been famine, all kinds of bad stuff had happened to them. But then under this king, for about 41 years, they experience peace and prosperity. Everything's good. It looks like everything's on the upswing. They've had military victories, their economy's strong, the people are confident, and as they look to the future, they're full of optimism because they think we're getting what we want, and the future looks bright. But God is sending prophets to them to say, hey, even though on the surface everything looks good for you guys, just below the surface, there are major issues that you guys need to address. You're getting into idolatry, there's moral decline in the kingdom, and if you guys don't wake up and repent and address these things, he's warning them his judgment is eventually going to come. So the first prophet he sends to this specific group is a prophet named Amos. And in the Minor Prophets, you could go and read Amos's story. The people don't listen to Amos. So then God brings Hosea onto the scene to get the people's attention and wake them up. So that brings us to verse 2. So we got the context in verse 1. Verse 2 of chapter 1, we read this. This is the story. When the Lord first began speaking to Israel through Hosea, he said to him, "Go and marry a prostitute." Everybody's paying attention at this point, okay? This is one of those verses where you're like, is that really in the Bible? It is. Like I said, this is an amazing book. There is a ton of stuff packed in here that God wants to communicate to us. So let's keep reading. God says, "Go marry a prostitute, so that some of her children will be conceived in prostitution. This will illustrate how Israel has acted like a prostitute by turning against the Lord and worshiping other gods." Now, a quick note here. As you're reading through the Bible, there are passages of Scripture that are descriptive. They're simply describing what happens. There's other times where you're reading through the Bible and a passage is prescriptive, meaning it's God saying, this is what I want you to do. The statement that God makes to Hosea, "Go marry a prostitute," is descriptive. So in this book, you are not going to find a relational guidebook. So don't take this as, okay, this is what God's saying for me to do in my situation. It's not. It's a unique situation. And why is God doing this? Why does God allow this unique thing to happen and give this unique command? Well, the passage says this. This will illustrate how Israel has acted like a prostitute by turning against the Lord and worshiping other gods. So God is doing this to illustrate through the prophet to the people what they're doing to him. So Hosea, he's going to go and marry this woman. She's going to cheat on him, and she's going to have children with other men. Now, at this point in the story, as you start reading it and you start understanding the story, it's helpful to kind of bring yourself into the story to imagine things from Hosea's perspective. So as we read through these coming verses, start to imagine what would it have been like for Hosea to experience what he's getting ready to experience. Verse 3. So Hosea marries Gomer. So that's who he marries. That's his wife. His wife's name is Gomer. So Hosea married Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she became pregnant and gave Hosea a son. So there's going to be 3 children who are born. And again, we're already told some of the kids are going to be the children of prostitution. So he's not going to be the father. Somebody else is going to be the dad. It's going to be the result of Gomer's multiple affairs. And all 3 of these children get symbolic names, names that paint a picture for Israel of what they're doing to God and what God's going to do in response. So this is the first child who's born, and this is the name that's given. Verse 4, and the Lord said, name the child Jezreel, for I am about to punish King Jehu's dynasty to avenge the murders he committed at Jezreel. So if you read through the story, and this is one of the really cool things about the Bible, is something like this is put here, and then you can go back in other passages in the Bible and figure out, okay, well, what's symbolic of the name Jezreel? And Jezreel is a valley. So it's a valley in Israel where at one point in their history, King Jehu, he wasn't the king at the time, he went and he massacred the royal family. And in doing that, he took the kingdom by force. So what God is saying in this symbolic name, Jezreel, he's saying, just like you ruling family, just like you guys took the throne through violence, I'm going to take it from you, and I'm going to take it through violence. That's the first symbolic name. Story goes on. Verse 6, we read this. Soon Gomer became pregnant again, gave birth to a daughter. And the Lord said to Hosea, name your daughter Lo-Ruhamah, not loved, for I will no longer show love to the people of Israel or forgive them. Now remember, Gomer is going to start having children with people other than Hosea. And we don't know exactly when that happens. You read through what scholars have to say about this story. There's some debate. Is the first one his, and then the subsequent children, the other 2 children, are born as a result of prostitution? We don't know. I would imagine that these next kids are the result of prostitution. So this name, this is a symbolic name, not loved. It's a symbolic name, and it's to represent how God feels about his people. But if you put yourself in Hosea's shoes, I wouldn't be surprised if Hosea, he's sitting in the other room, the midwives and her family are in the room with her, she's giving birth. He knows about the affairs. He's living with the reality and the hurt of that. And then they bring out this child for him to name this child. He already knows what the name's going to be. And then he sees this kid. He knows it's not his kid. This kid is a reminder to him that his wife cheated on him and it's somebody else's kid. So I think that this name wasn't just symbolic, but I think this name probably had a personal meaning attached to it for him. How can I love that child? It's not even my kid. Every time I see that kid, it's just going to be a reminder of what my wife did to me. That's somebody else's baby. It goes on. Verses 8 and 9. Then another child is born. After Gomer had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, she again became pregnant and gave birth to a second son. And the Lord said, name him Lo-Ammi, not my people. For Israel is not my people, and I am not their God. So again, it's symbolic. And Hosea knows in advance of naming the child what God wants him to name the child. But you would imagine, it's been multiple affairs at this point. There's been multiple times where Gomer has gone out and she's slept around and she's had kids with other people. And so then he comes in again to name this child, and he's probably sitting there and he's like, it doesn't even look like me. It's not my kid. So again, it's a symbolic name that's helping us understand what the people are doing to God. But my guess is, as Hosea is giving these names, he's looking at this situation and he feels exactly how God felt. He understands what the people are doing to God. So for Gomer and Israel, as a result of this, at this point in the story, they are in a terrible situation. They've cheated. And it's not just once, but they've prostituted themselves out to whoever or whatever they think will give them what they want. And now, what you would expect is they stand in the place of judgment. I mean, you're probably already thinking in the story, okay, at some point, this has got to stop. At some point, this has got to come to an end, and they've got to get what's coming to them. Hosea would be justified in being furious, just like God would be justified in being furious at his people. So we read this at the beginning of chapter 2. Chapter 1 ends with the children. Chapter 2 starts this way, verse 2. So fascinating. But now bring charges against Israel, your mother. So as you read through this, you can hear 2 voices. You can hear Hosea, the prophet's voice, speaking to Gomer, and you can hear God's voice speaking to his people, Israel. Chapter 2 starts with a blending of the 2 voices. But now bring charges against Israel, your mother, for she is no longer my wife, and I am no longer her husband. Tell her to remove the prostitute's makeup from her face and the clothing that exposes her breasts. Otherwise, I will strip her as naked as she was on the day she was born. I will leave her to die of thirst in the dry and barren wilderness. I mean, that's gnarly. But it's what you would expect. Multiple affairs, cheated on multiple times, children with other men, that now he's responsible for it. I mean, you would expect this kind of anger. You would expect this emotional response into what's going on. And no one's going to blame Hosea for this. After everything that Gomer's done to him, nobody's going to blame Hosea for feeling this way. This is what you'd expect. And this brings us to the first thing the book of Hosea does for us. This is the first fill in the blank. Hosea wakes us up to what sin is. The book is designed to shock us and get our attention and realize something that's really important. And that is to wake us up to what sin is. Now, everyone knows they've sinned. Everyone's lied. We've lusted. We've lashed out in anger. We all know we've sinned. But usually when we think of our personal sin, we think of it in comparison to other people. So we think that, okay, yeah, God is he's gonna address sin, but he's a teacher who's grading a test and he's grading on a curve. And so as long as, I know somebody over here that's done something worse than me. So as long as I don't do what they've done and do something that bad, yeah, I'm not like perfect. I'm not the example of doing everything right, but I haven't done anything that bad. I'm kind of in the middle of the class. And so as long as I stay in the middle of the class, I'll get a passing grade because he's grading on a curve. It's kind of the general idea that we in our society have about sin is, yeah, I know I've got it, but if I just kind of stay in the middle, I'll be good and I'll get by. But in Hosea, what God does is he compares sin to prostitution. Now, why does he do that? Why does he compare sin to prostitution? Is that because, well, that's the really bad sin, and as long as you don't do that, you're going to get a passing grade? Is that what he's saying through this book? Well, no, that's not what he's saying. The reason he compares sin to prostitution is because prostitution represents what's at the heart of every sin. So as you read through the Bible, what you find is the primary analogy that God uses to describe our relationship with him is marriage. Marriage is the primary analogy God uses to describe what it means to be in a relationship with him. And we all know marriage, it's an exclusive relationship. It's a relationship where two people come together and they enter into a covenant. It's actually a legal covenant. It's a promise that they make to each other. It's an exclusive relationship. When my wife and I got married, as part of the wedding ceremony, the pastor asked me this question. Then he turned to my wife and he asked her the same one worded slightly differently. He asked me, he said, "Do you, Elliot, take Allie to be your wife, to live together in holy marriage, to love her, comfort her, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, be faithful to her as long as you both shall live?" That question that he's asking, that then we all know the answer, you say, "I do." And then he turns to her and he asks the same question. That question captures the covenant. It captures the promise. This is what you enter into. It's the exclusive nature of the relationship of marriage. And in a marriage, love is a gift that's freely given. Love is not forced. Love is not paid for. Love is a gift that's freely given. And in a marriage, sex is the physical expression of a couple's love and commitment to each other. And these two go together. They're inseparable. In a marriage, love and sex are inseparable. And we know this. We actually know this instinctively. This is why when a spouse has been cheated on, this is why they're filled, they're not just upset, they're full of rage. They're full of wrath because the exclusive nature of the relationship has been violated. And everybody knows this. We don't question this. Nobody wonders why a spouse is so upset when they're cheated on. They know that it's right and it's justified for them to be angry over the affair and to demand that if the affair doesn't end, then the relationship ends because the exclusive nature of the relationship has been violated. So what God is doing in Hosea is he's making the point that God views sin the same way a married person views an affair. It's a violation of the exclusive nature of our relationship with him. Because what prostitution does is it takes that good gift of sex that only belongs inside the exclusive relationship of marriage, and it monetizes it. Prostitution monetizes sex. It attaches a price tag to it. There's a dollar amount attached to it. And it's not about a committed relationship. It's not about love. It's about an exchange of services, and once the act is done, the relationship's over. That's what it does. Well, in the same way that prostitution does that to sex, sin monetizes worship. Whenever we sin, we're worshiping something. What worship is, the idea of worship is when we organize our lives around something. When God created us, he created us to worship something. We're all going to worship something. The question is just what. But worship is when you organize your life around something. You build your life to revolve around a specific thing. What sin does is it puts something other than God at the center of our lives in exchange for immediate gratification now. So if you start to understand what sin is, what you'll understand is every sin is a decision to cheat on God with another lover, to worship something other than God in exchange for what I want now. So if you read through Hosea, so the first 3 chapters in Hosea are about Hosea and his wife Gomer. There's a little bit of comments by God in those first 3 chapters. The next 11 chapters, it's a 14-chapter book. Chapters 4 through 14 are all about Israel and God and their relationship. And through those next 11 chapters, God brings specific charges against the people. He starts to identify the specific sins they engaged in, the specific things that they organized their life around. So stuff that he highlights, he accuses them of organizing their lives around the God of human power, putting their hope in what man can do to save them instead of putting their hope in God. He accuses of putting their hope in money, organizing their lives around the God of money, thinking that money will protect them and money will give them what they want. And as long as they have money, then they'll have the good life. He accuses them of organizing their life around comfort and pleasure, living for that instead of doing what he wants them to do. As you start to unpack the book and see the specific charges, you realize we might have lived thousands of years apart, but a lot of the charges that he makes against them, he could also lay against us. You realize that as they went through life, even though they did the religious practices, they went to the worship ceremonies and they did the festivals, when it came to how they really lived, they were religious pragmatists. Meaning, they weren't concerned with what's right. They were concerned with, well, what's going to give me what I want? What's the thing that works and is going to give me what I want? So yeah, they believed in God, but when it came to the practice of their life, they were really just like, well, if it's going to give me what I want, and there's this other way of thinking that'll give me that, well, I'll buy into that. I'll do that thing. It wasn't about honoring God. It wasn't about pleasing him. In their decision-making, they organized their life around these other things. So when it came to a decision, it wasn't, okay, what does God want me to do? It's, well, what does the power say? Who's in power and what do they say I should do? What does money say? What's going to get me the most money? What's going to result in me having pleasure or comfort? This is what they organized their life around. These are the things they worshiped. So what God is saying to them, and what he's also saying to us, is whenever you put something at the center of your life other than him and organize your life around it, what you're doing is you're behaving like a prostitute. So we start out in Hosea, and we start feeling really bad for Hosea. Man, it's terrible what's happening to him. But pretty quickly you start to wake up and you realize, I don't know if this is about what's happening to Hosea as much as this is about, I'm the prostitute. I'm the one in the situation I'm the one who's organizing my life around something other than God. And so at this point in the story, if you're starting to get really uncomfortable, you understand the message of Hosea. That's what God's trying to do. He's trying to wake us up and make us really uncomfortable about what sin really is. See, God is not a teacher who's grading a test. He's like a husband responding to an affair, and he is justified and right at being ticked over the sin. This brings us to the second thing that Hosea does. If you understand the first point, you'll understand the second point. The second thing Hosea does is it captures our amazement. Thankfully, the book does not end with Hosea and God's anger over sin. Thankfully, the book doesn't end there. If one of us was writing the book, that's probably where it'd end. There's been multiple affairs. These children have been born. We're upset. We're ready for there to be justice. Ended at the beginning of chapter 2. But the book doesn't end there. The book keeps going. And actually, there's a surprising shift that takes place in chapter 2. Right after this statement about justice is coming, there's a love poem from God to his people. I want to read a few of the verses of this poem. It's chapter 2, verses 14 through 20, and then I want to highlight a couple things. So let me read this. This is what God says. After he's made this statement of justice for his anger over sin, he says, "But then I will win her back once again. I will lead her into the desert and speak tenderly to her there. I will return her vineyards to her and transform the valley of trouble into a gateway of hope." Skipping ahead a few verses. "I will remove all weapons of war from the land, all swords and bows, so you can live unafraid in peace and safety. I will make you my wife forever, showing you righteousness and justice, unfailing love and compassion. I will be faithful to you and make you mine, and you will finally know me as the Lord." So in response to their sin, God then gives this amazing love poem to his people. And what he's revealing to us is the same way he responded to their sin is the same way he responds to our sin. I want to highlight two things. The first thing he does in response to our sin is God pursues us. In response to our sin, God pursues us. He says this. He says, "I will win her back once again. I'll do what it takes to get her back. I'll pursue her and get her back." You know, a lot of times, if you start to wake up to the reality of what your sin is, a lot of times the guilt comes, which is, it's right. We should feel guilty because we are. But then in the guilt, we could start thinking, well, because of what I've done, there's no way God could love me. I'm too far gone. I've wandered too far away. There's no way he could forgive me. There's no way he could love me. But that's not God's attitude in response to our sin. His attitude is, even in your sin, I'm going to do what it takes to win you back. I'm going to pursue you. He goes on, he says, "I'll speak tenderly to her." The idea is, I'm going to speak to her heart. So the image is not of a bounty hunter hunting down a criminal. The image is of somebody searching for another person that they love, that they care about, that they really have the best interests of that person in mind. That's what God does. In response to our sin, he pursues us. So the point that God's making here is you are never too far gone. You've never wandered so far away that you're outside of the area where God will come and search for you. He will pursue you no matter how far you've gone. Second observation from this. Not only does he pursue us, but God invites us to start over. It's so fascinating. He says this, verse 19. He says, "I'll make you my wife forever." In other words, he's saying, let's go back to the altar where we first said our vows and let's start over fresh. And let's figure it out. Let's start over. Let's go back to the beginning and start again. He goes on and he says, "Showing you righteousness, justice, unfailing love, and compassion." The idea is he's not going to hold anything back. So he's not saying, okay, I'll pursue you and then I'll enter into this relationship with you again, but then I'm going to keep you at arm's distance because I don't really trust you. Or I'm going to bring you back, but then you've really got to earn back my love. You know, you have to work to pay off some kind of debt and to deserve me loving you, and only then will we go back to the way that it was. No, he says, hey, right now, I'm pursuing you. Wherever you're at, I'm inviting you. Let's start over right now. And when we start over, I'm not going to hold anything back from you. This is amazing. This is an amazing statement on God's behalf of how he chooses to respond to our sin. Now, it's one thing for us to read this poem that's he says to Israel, but also is true for us. It's one thing to read it, but God also wants us to see this played out. He wants us to see a graphic display of what his love looks like in action. So at the beginning of chapter 3, we read this, an amazing set of verses. "Then the Lord said to me," so this is Hosea speaking, "Then the Lord said to me, go and love your wife again." Amazing. Gomer's the one that walked out. Gomer's the one that chose this. She chose the affairs. She chose to pursue other lovers. She chose the prostitution. God says, go love your wife again, even though she commits adultery with another lover. This will illustrate that the Lord still loves Israel, even though the people have turned to other gods and love to worship them. So I bought her back for 15 pieces of silver and 5 bushels of barley and a measure of wine. This is amazing. She chose this, and she had to be bought back. The reason she had to be bought back is because the things that she thought would give her what she wanted actually enslaved her and entrapped her. So it's not just like she's found this other guy and she loves him more and she's in a better situation. No, she's now a slave. And again, the language of prostitution, she's now a trapped sex worker. And how did she get there? She chose it. She volunteered for this. There's nobody to blame for the situation she's in but her. It's the only place the blame could fall is directly on her. And God says, go love her again. Go get her back. Go do for her just what I do for my people. Now, as I read this is just 2 verses. It's helpful for me, for the weight of this story to really fall on me. It's helpful for me to start to imagine, well, what would it have been like for Hosea to do this? I mean, we're not given a ton of details here, but we know he's got to go get her, and we know that she's in prostitution. So as I imagine this story working out, my guess is, I don't know how long she's been gone. I don't know how long she's been away, but she's been away for some period of time. Hosea probably doesn't know exactly where she's at, but he probably has a few ideas. He's probably heard rumors. I mean, they have the same family, they're neighbors. People probably said, oh, I saw her with this guy, or, she was at this location. So he probably knows a general idea, but he doesn't know exactly where she is. So God says, go win her back. So he starts searching for her and pursuing her, just like God pursues us. And he probably has to go over to the bad side of town. Because let's face it, she chose this path. That's probably where she's ended up, on the other side of town. So here's Hosea, the prophet of God, walking down streets through neighborhoods that he doesn't frequent. The people in those neighborhoods are probably like, what's the prophet of God doing here? He doesn't belong on this side of town. He's supposed to be somewhere else. And as he's walking through this neighborhood, searching for her, he's probably asking people, he's saying, hey, has anybody seen my wife? She's about this height. This is the color of her hair. I heard she was hanging out with these people last time. He's searching for her, going from place to place, trying to find out where she is. And then he finds her. And the amounts that he has to pay, these are really, really important. The amounts that he has to pay are significant. It's cash, barley, and wine, 15 pieces of silver, and then barley and wine. Now, in that period of time, to free someone from captivity, the agreed upon price was 30 pieces of silver. He doesn't have 30 pieces of silver. The indication is Hosea is a poor man. So he gets all the cash that he has, which isn't enough to buy her back, and then he has to round up anything else he has to get her freedom. The point is, he paid a tremendous personal price to free her from the decisions that she made. I wonder what Gomer thought when he walked in the room. After he pays the price to this man who's keeping her captive, I wonder what she thought when he walked in the room. Here's Gomer. She's in this life of prostitution. She's a slave at this point. Her own choice, her own decisions got her here. He walks in the room. Here she is in her filth. Everybody knows why she's in this situation. I wonder what she thought. I wonder if she said to Hosea, I don't deserve this. Like, after everything I've done for you, you shouldn't be here. I know what I've done. You shouldn't come get me. I wonder if she thought, Hosea, I can't repay this debt. Like, you're paying for me to be freed, but I can never repay that. There's nothing I can do to pay you off for what you're doing for me. And then I wonder if in response to that, I wonder if Hosea looked at her and said, Gomer, I'm not here so that you can repay a debt. I'm here to love you again. I've pursued you so that you and I can go and start over just like God does with us. That's why I'm here. I'm not here for you to earn my love. I'm not here for you to work your way back. I'm here so that we can start over right now. This is amazing what God has his prophet do. This is a graphic illustration of God's love for us. That's what God is having the prophet do. And it is so different than what we would do. Like I said, for us, we would probably stop the book of Hosea at the beginning of chapter 2. Anger over sin, a demand for justice. But God is so amazing. His love is amazingly different than ours. That brings us to the third point in the story. The third thing to get from Hosea is Hosea points us to Christ. So if you've been thinking, as I've been going through this, that, I think I've heard that story before. Well, you're right. Hosea is not a coincidence. This story points straight to Christ. I want to read something from Romans chapter 5. So fascinating. Romans 5, 6 through 8. This is the Apostle Paul. After Jesus has come, Jesus died on the cross, paid the debt for our sin. The Apostle Paul writes this to explain what happened. He says, you see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, when we were like Gomer and Israel, unable to free ourselves, we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. The point is, we're ungodly. We're unrighteous. We're not good. There's nothing we can point to that we've done that is redeemable. There's nothing. When you wake up to what your sin is, you realize this. You realize, like it says, we're powerless. The next two words are so important. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So 750 years after the book of Hosea is written, and we have this amazing display of God pursuing his people, inviting them to start over, and then the prophet going and living it out. The ultimate display of God's love is when Jesus Christ comes, lives a perfect life, goes to the cross to pay for our sin, pay for what we've done, so that we can have a relationship with God once again. The ultimate display. So the book of Hosea points straight to Christ. Point number 4. Fourth thing Hosea does for us. Hosea invites us to turn around. Gomer had a choice. Israel had a choice. You and I today, we have a choice. You know, the sad thing is, as you read through the story, Israel didn't turn around. Israel kept trusting that human power would save them. They kept hoping that money would give them what they wanted and take care of them. They kept prioritizing comfort and pleasure at the expense of what God wanted them to do. So eventually, they experienced what God said they would. But God is still inviting people to turn around. So for you and me, the invitation is turn around, to wake up to what our sin is, to be captured by how amazing his love is. He pursues us, he invites us to start over, and to realize that the forgiveness and the freedom that we need is found in what Christ has done. So what I want to do is, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to invite the band out on the stage, and the band's going to sing our final song. It's about a 5-minute song. And as they get ready, I want you to do this. My guess is there's three large groups of people in the room, and I don't want to pigeonhole anybody, but my guess is all of us fall in one of these three groups. My guess is some of you have never experienced God's love, and you're in disagreement with God over what your sin really is. So this isn't going to take long. We've got about 5 minutes left. As the band sings this song in a minute, I would encourage you to wrestle with, okay, God says that I am guilty of worshiping something other than him, revolving my life around something other than him, and I am guilty of the sin just like prostitution, and he is justified in being angry. So for just 5 minutes, wrestle with, is that true? Is what God's saying about me, is that actually true? There's another group of you in the room, and my guess is you've experienced God's love, and you say with your mouth, you say, I believe in God, but the reality is you've wandered away. You have decided that you're going to organize your life around something other than God. So whether it's just like Israel, whether it's human power and what man says to do, or it's living for money, or living for pleasure, or living for comfort, God's really not at the center of your life, and it's something other than him. Hosea is an invitation to turn around. God has been pursuing you. You don't have to clean yourself up to come back to him. He's right there, standing there, saying, just turn around and let's start over. So my encouragement to you is, in response to his pursuit, simply repent of it. Call it what it is. God, I've been pursuing something else other than you. I repent of that. God, help me to get back on track with you. Do that during this final song. And then there's another group of you who your heart's desire really is to please God. You really are pursuing him. Your relationship with him really matters to you. You're not perfect. You don't do this perfectly, but you really care about this. My encouragement to you as we sing this final song is, let the story of Hosea remind you of how amazing God is to come and save someone like you from your sin, to forgive you and to save you. So let it be a memory of what God's done. So let's go ahead and sing. We're going to take about 5 minutes and sing this final song. Let's stand up together.